Good morning. This is called Whatcha Reading, and I'm John Roy, and this is Katie Nading.
Hi.
And Katie's going to tell us about a book she's been reading. All right? So, tell us just the name, the author, and a sentence or two about it first.
This is called The Gift of Forgiveness by Katherine Schwarzenegger Pratt. So she is the daughter of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Maria Shriver.
Okay. Now, I'm assuming, since it's a book that you brought, that you find a lot in it redeeming and enjoyable and meaningful. Tell me a weakness of it, or tell me something that you found in it that you think, well, you know, she could have said more about this, or she left me a little bit more wondering. Anything like that?
I really don't think there's a weakness in this book.
Really?
Yes, I would highly recommend it.
All right, you highly recommend it. All right, well, let's read a little bit from it, okay?
Okay.
We've got about 10 minutes, so read just a passage that you found pretty meaningful.
Okay, so she interviewed about 22 people who have had pretty strong struggles with forgiveness. And one of the people she interviewed is Elizabeth Smart, who was abducted when she was a child. And she was abducted for about 9 months. And her story just really stood out to me. She basically chose to forgive her captors, which is pretty extraordinary. So I'll just read this passage. Despite all she went through, Elizabeth was still able to find reasons to be grateful. She pointed out that many kidnappings are committed by someone the victim knows. She told me, "I actually feel so lucky that I was kidnapped and abused by strangers, because most people who have experienced similar things know their captors. For me, I didn't have to have relationships with them. They were out of my life, so that made it much easier." So what she's saying is, look for, those glimmers of light in your story.
Okay, I can see that. Now, why should we forgive people?
I think people have anger in certain situations when they're thinking about forgiveness, and it kind of frees you of that anger. And so you're not having that person in your head every day just playing in your mind. And I think it helps to really move on in your life and focus on the positive things.
Well said. So, forgiveness is not something that you do on Tuesday and it stays in effect for Wednesday through Saturday.
Right.
Okay. So we forgive, we make the every effort to forgive, to try to get them out of our head so that we can turn our attention towards the future, towards the things that matter. So forgiveness allows us to let things go as best we can. So, Katie, as you take this book and the things you've learned from it and you apply it to your own home with your two girls running around, so how does that work when they get crosswise with one another? How does forgiveness work in a practical way?
Yeah, I think just for me, explaining to my children, that they will be getting hurt, it's inevitable. But I think just understanding that the process of whatever the situation is, that they need to work towards forgiveness and go off of that.
What you said is really beautiful because you're trying to get them to understand that they will get hurt. It's inevitable that you get hurt, and that's an important lesson. And we don't have to push them back together and say, "Now say you're sorry," or anything like that. I mean, it is one child understanding that they hurt another, and the other child understanding, well, what I'm feeling today is inevitable. This is just the way life is.
Yeah.
People do this. So that's a good way to parent and a good lesson for the children to learn. A good lesson for us all to learn. All right. Now, Katie, when I hear you tell the Elizabeth Smart story, I think to myself all the times that I've had to preach about forgiveness. And every time I preach about forgiveness, I feel as if I shouldn't be the one preaching about forgiveness, because I feel like I've had such a narrow range of things to have to forgive people for. I've never had something like Elizabeth Smart. And stories like that impress me. The people down in Charleston who forgave the guy that shot their family. I mean, and they just forgave him. How that works, I just don't know. So when you hear somebody preach about forgiveness or talk about forgiveness. How does that make you feel?
Yeah, I think for me, like, that was the hardest thing about this book, is because for me, I've always thought of forgiveness as you sit in a room with someone and you talk to that person, and then you just need to instantly have no feelings at all. And I think what changed my mind about forgiveness in this book was that each person had a different story. One person, it took them 30 years to forgive. And one person, it took them 5 minutes. And so I think what people need to know is that, you know, each person has their own journey, no matter how long it takes. Each person has, you know, a more intense story than the next. And I think, yeah, in church, sometimes I think people think that it needs to just be this immediate snap.
Well, we can all make it sound like that.
No.
But you put it so well. What we're talking about is a process of forgiveness. That if you're on that journey, you know, if it takes you, it's just like growing up. Some people are grown at 15, some people are grown at 20, some people are grown at 24. Some people never grow up. So it just takes a while.
Yeah.
And so it is the intent of trying to forgive.
Yeah.
And if you're on that path, if it takes you a few minutes, that's fine. If it takes you years, that's fine. Now, when you were reading these stories, what kind of feelings were you dealing with?
Well, I think everyone has, you know, people, like, if you're alive, you need to forgive someone.
Right.
So I think, you know, just, you know, there's definitely people in my life that I could think of that I needed to forgive. And I think it helped me just kind of take that step forward and, you know, step out in faith and start that process.
Okay. All right. So I want you to give me your elevator speech on this, because we really want people to pick this, hold up the book again. We really want them to read this book. All right. So, you know, we know that people get broken in this world. We know that we have people in the congregation who've been hurt a variety of ways. So what's your elevator speech to them to say, hey, this book is worth, I look at that book and I think, well, it's probably about 3.5 hours maybe of time?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So give us the elevator speech on it.
Well, I think it's definitely an easy read.
Okay.
And I think each person will find that they connect with one of the people that she interviewed. You know, if it isn't Elizabeth Smart, it might be Sue Klebold, who was the mother of the Columbine shooter.
Oh, really?
And just, you know, what she went through having her son, you know, do such evil.
That's interesting.
So there's a different kind of character or person that I think each person will identify with. Okay.
Now, one last thing about the author. Y'all all know Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you all know Schreiber. Her mother was
Maria Schreiber.
Maria Schreiber. Is she a journalist as well, or is she just?
She's just a writer.
Just a writer. Okay. And she'd be in her 30s, you said? All right. All right. So, The Gift of Forgiveness. One last time. It's a great book about forgiving and gives you a variety of different case studies to look at. And remember, forgiving people, it's a process. All right? Thank you for joining us.